peace. It will be important, I think, for him to find a partner in that process. And there are people within the cabinet with credentials like Rabin's that I believe Peres will bring with him and hopefully recreate. It won't be the same. It can never be the same. But recreate a situation in which they will be able to move forward in the process.
Mr. Ambassador, would you have in mind possibly General Barak, who of course was a very, very close friend of Yitzhak Rabin, and also I guess of Shimon Peres? Would he be the kind of military muscle to bring in on that side of the equation now that Rabin is gone?
Rolly, I ask your indulgence that I just really don't think it's appropriate for me at the moment to be speculating about things in the future. There'll be time after the morning for the politics. I understand your interest in it, but I think at this moment we have to focus on the terrible tragedy and say goodbye to your friend and mine and the friend of the United States as we bury him tomorrow.
Appreciating that, Mr. Ambassador, just one last question on the idea of the future, and that is, can you say that the U.S. has to play a major role in keeping the peace process on track now that General Rabin is gone?
President Clinton made two commitments. First, with Prime Minister Rabin, that as his government took calculated risks for peace, the President would minimize those risks. And then on September 13th, when the Israeli-Palestinian Declaration of Principles was signed, the President committed to do everything he could to make sure that the peace process succeeded. Those two commitments stand today, and the President's presence here tomorrow will be a strong manifestation of that commitment. And I believe that he and the Secretary of State fully intend to ensure, as he said last night, that the legacy of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin is a secure and lasting peace in the Middle East.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Indyk. We'll be back with some final thoughts about Prime Minister Rabin from former Secretary of State Eagleburger after these messages.
Ms. Secretary, before I ask you my first question, let's take a look at the late Prime Minister Rabin and what he said on this show on September 30th.
I believe for many years, and I made it clear prior to the elections in Israel in '92, that as a result of them, I'm Prime Minister of Israel, that my goal is not the whole land of Israel. I believe that dreams of Jews for 2,000 years to return to Zion were to build a Jewish state and not a binational state. Therefore, I don't want to annex the 2.2 million Palestinians who are different entity than us, politically, religiously, nationally, against their will to become Israelis. And therefore, I see peaceful coexistence between Israel as a Jewish state, not all over the land of Israel, on most of it, its capital, the United Jerusalem, its security border, the Jordan River, next to it, Palestinian entity, less than a state, that runs the life of Palestinians. It is not ruled by Israel. It is ruled by the Palestinians.
Mr. Secretary, those are wonderful words. How can the United States make sure that the continuity of what the late Prime Minister said there is carried out, and that the Likud party lends its efforts and puts its shoulder to that wheel?
Rolly, we can't, to put it bluntly, assure it. What we can do is Israel knows, and we all know, that without the support of the United States, Israel would have a much tougher time. Now, I'm not at all saying that we should ever withdraw our support, but the Israelis need to understand that the degree of enthusiasm in the United States for supporting Israel is going to depend to some degree on the evidence we have that they truly are trying to move toward peace. And you've heard, more eloquently stated, I've never heard it, than what the Prime Minister said in his last time with you. That's the sort of thing that every American can understand and support. If the Israelis turn their back on the process and go back to talking about a complete Israeli state, they're going to lose support in the United States. This is not to say that the United States shouldn't forever be supportive of their security. But if what they want is the American people feeling the strong support that we've felt for so many years, they need to demonstrate to us, they being the Israelis and the Israeli government, that they're truly intent on trying to find a peaceful solution.
Mr. Eagleburger, isn't the sight of General Rabin disavowing a greater Israel, isn't that just a larger step away from the expected, even the Nixon going to China? When do you think he reached that point?
I suspect after he became Prime Minister and as the process began, he came to realize that, well, to me it's not even hard to understand, but I'm not an Israeli. You don't want to force into your state people who don't want to be a part of your state.
But a lot of people don't understand that.
I understand that.
Even today.
But all I'm saying is he saw it. It's why I say he's a man not only of vision but of courage, tremendous courage. And he walked that path alone for a while, but with Peres there with him. But it's a remarkable recognition, yes, and I understand why it's tough for so many Israelis to accept it.
And American Jews, too.
Yeah, there's no question about it. But the fact of the matter is, at some point, we all have to understand what's possible and what isn't. And we all have to understand that done badly in the peace process, time is not on Israel's side.
Mr. Secretary, we just have a minute left. Going back to what you said earlier, that perhaps Mr. Peres, the new Prime Minister, will have to back off a bit. Please give us a more precise description of what you mean.
Well, it's when I heard you repeat it, it worried me because I don't want to leave the wrong impression. What I'm really trying to say is Peres, as I said, was the sort of inspirational leader. He's the fellow who developed these ideas, some of which were realistic, some of which may not be. But Rabin was the steadying force, the strategist. All I'm saying now is that in that team, with the critical mass removed, Mr. Peres, who is known as the fellow who wanted to push the process faster, needs to understand that if he's to hang on to the centrist Israeli view, he needs to convince them that he is a realist as well as a dreamer. He needs to fill in part of that role that Rabin had.
Thank you. Larry Eagleburger, former Secretary of State. We have to break for messages. My partner and I will be back with a comment in a moment.
From IBM. See and hear me at Radio Shack.
Nobody does it like you.
The new Hoover Steam Vac Deluxe with 5-brush agitator. Compared to professionals, there's no comparison.
Nobody does it like you.
Another action-packed week in the NBA. All the spectacular moves, the jams, the bombs from three-point land, and all the highlights with Lincoln Fred, the best team in sports. This week in the NBA, tonight, 11:30 Eastern on CNN.
To earthbound man, he gave the key to the silent world. TBS presents Jacques-Yves Cousteau, My First 85 Years. Tonight, 9 Eastern. Turn to TBS.
Don't blame copier. A lot of paper jams are caused by paper. Get Hammermill, the paper that works.
Today, there's a lineup of engaging and thought-provoking programs waiting for you. Late Edition with Frank Sesno interviews the week's top newsmakers. And there's the latest news to keep you informed. Reliable Sources examines the performance of the press. Capital Gang offers their opinions on the week in Washington. And Crossfire Sunday debates the issues from the left and the right, all from the people who cover your world. CNN.
Rolly, when did you first meet Itzhak Rabin, and what was your initial impression of him?
I met him in '67 when he came here after the Six-Day War as ambassador, sent by Golda Meir. She wanted to train him to become prime minister after her. He was here for 4 or 5 years. Bob, I got to know him extremely well. I think the answer to the question is, I sensed a steel in him of determination. Of course, in those days, they weren't talking peace process. They were talking the aftermath of the Six-Day War and the occupied territories. But a sense of steely determination and enormous, unchallengeable honesty. He never told me anything approaching a falsehood. He always stated the truth as he saw it, and it changed my mind about a lot of things in Israel.
When did you begin to see him evolving toward a warrior for peace instead of just a hardliner?
You remember the show we had, Bob, from Jerusalem? You were, I guess Tel Aviv. You were not there, but I did, and Evans and Novak there. And this was during the campaign of 1992. And he amazed me by talking about the possibility of giving up some land on the Golan Heights. And, you know, I found it hard to believe, and he was saying that, of course, to other reporters and Israeli reporters, but he meant it, and I had a sense that he meant it.
We don't meet his kind very often, do we? I'm Robert Novak.
I'm Roland Evans.
Special presentation.